about this topic.
Hello. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are. Welcome to our session live today. We are going to be talking about why forward deployed engineers are refining and redefining customer success. I mean, this is obviously a hot topic, so seems appropriate that we are now talking about it on the hottest day of the year, at least here in the UK and the continent thus far. And allow me to then welcome Andrea Bumstead back. She's the founder of CS Impact. A pleasure to host you again, Andrea, and pleasure to share this topic with you, because I think both of us are quite excited about how this is now reshaping really the customer success world.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Pleasure. So obviously, for those of you who don't know Andrea, she can introduce herself a little bit more while we get going. And we've got lots of interesting material to share with you, especially Andrea has done a whole bunch of research with you. So there is going to be a link that just we posted on the comments. So if you want to get some more of Andrea's great research, you can access that link, but we will obviously demystify some of that over the call as well. But please do join the chat. Please have us some comments. I am sure there is lots of questions about this topic. So yeah, Andrea, let's get into it, right? Perhaps let's level set. You know, when someone says forward deployed engineer, for the benefit of everyone, what are we talking about?
Sure, no problem. And you know what? Let me just tell the audience who I am in case they don't know who I am. So I am a two-time former vice president of customer success. Now I help companies rebuild their post-sales teams, and I work with companies that are anywhere from startups to $3 billion organizations. I'm also a top 100 CS strategist. You can follow me on LinkedIn, my Substack, and as Mina mentioned, I did a ton of research on the forward deployed engineer role, and there's a link to the guide. So if you'd like more information, that link is in the chat. So you can just click on the link. You can find the guide on my website and download it. But yes, let's get into it. So before I tell you sort of what a forward deployed engineer is, I'm going to tell you a very short story, which is that in May, so just 1 month ago, I went to SaaStr AI in San Francisco. And my first time attending SaaStr, they always have a Chief Customer Officer Summit as part of SaaStr, just like they have a CRO Summit, a CMO Summit, they have the CCO Summit. This year, it was renamed the Forward Deployed Summit. Okay. And so I went to SaaStr and I wanted to learn all about this new forward deployed engineer role, which I did. I heard from companies like Harvey and Lovable and LinkedIn. And I mean, it was all talking about forward deployed engineers. But I came home and I was like, no, I need to know a lot more. So I was like, you know, where did this role come from? Because it's just exploded. In the past year, the number of job postings is up 734% year over year. Like it's crazy how much it's exploded. But two, I just wanted to know, like, who's hiring for this role? You know, what does it mean? What does it mean for the future of post sales? So let me share just a couple slides with you. But I came home and basically used Claude to analyze over 50 job postings for forward deployed engineers. I was like, what are the patterns across these roles? What does it mean? What are the top skills that someone needs for this role? I also asked Claude to like go dig into like Palantir and its model where this role originated from and compare that to the role today. Are we talking about the same thing, something different? So I had 25 pages of research that I distilled into the guide, which is in the chat, so you can go and get it. But I'll present a few things, starting with what is the forward deployed engineer based on the research I did. So let me just share my screen.
So while you're doing that, Andrea, we were just talking about this morning. I've now had at least 2 other invites for webinars around forward deployed engineering, all happening just now. There's obviously a ton of blogs that are coming out of this. So yeah, it definitely is shaking up the CS world, and for potentially for interesting reasons. So let's start with who are they and where did it come from? I know you mentioned a little bit there already.
Yes. So let's back up. So where did the role come from? So the role actually started with a company called Palantir. And this wasn't actually very recent. In fact, this was back in about 2016. Palantir created this role for helping customers actually deploy their software and make it do useful things in their organization. So what does that mean? Well, basically, Palantir sold software for making sense of huge, messy piles of data, but the software didn't solve any specific problem on its own out of the box. So think of like when you install Claude Cowork on your machine, it doesn't actually do anything until you tell it to do a thing and you get an outcome, right? And that was the same with Palantir. And so instead of just shipping their software and walking away, they sent engineers to actually sit inside the customer's building and work alongside the actual staff and write custom code on the platform until it did something genuinely useful for that customer. So it was like this forward deployed engineer, which they called a forward deployed software engineer, worked directly with the customer. And they nicknamed this role a Delta. Okay, so that's where it came from. But then fast forward to today, because I'm sure in 2016 you didn't hear of this role, but now we're hearing forward deployed engineer everywhere. So the question is, well, why are we hearing about it now? And the reason is because AI native software works a lot. Well, it's very similar to the Palantir model. Just like I used that example of Claude Cowork, when you install sort of AI native software on your computer, or you're using it on the cloud, right? It doesn't actually do anything until you tell it to do something, you verify that it's correct, and you build upon it. And so AI native companies started essentially copying this model. So they looked at Palantir and they were like, oh, that would actually really work for us. We need someone to go into these organizations and actually help our customers use the software and verify that it's correct, as well as feed information back to the product team about how they're using it. And they needed people who could code. So sit directly with the customer, code, and verify outcomes. And so that's why you're hearing about this role now.
That's a great evolution of what has happened and why it's also exploding right now, based on the idea that technically you are a value creator, but you are much more embedded than a normal CSM, which tells the customer what they do. This person is actually doing it for the customer in some way. If I summarize that in a nutshell.
Yes, exactly.
Perfect. Well, that's a good level setting. So you mentioned there are a couple things already about technical skills. Can you tell us a little bit more about what are some of the other top skills that these forward deployed engineers should have, or at least from your research, again, what was the things that came out of those job adverts?
Sure. Yeah. So something else I wanted to know, which is exactly that. Like, what are the top skills that this role needs to have? And so Bloomberg actually analyzed 1,000 FTE job postings in January 2026. So this was just, a few months ago. And on the screens here, you can actually see the top skills that they're looking for in this role. So you can see, if I sort of summarize here, it's like the ability to code, so knowing Python and other coding languages, LLM app development, but also customer-facing communication. Like this role needed to be able to communicate at an executive level, to summarize, to talk about outcomes. Other things were ability to make decisions under ambiguity, meaning not having all of the information. Could they sort of collect that, make decisions, make a call with the customer? And then this idea of evaluation frameworks, which really means like, how do we verify and test that the output that the AI is creating is verifiably correct? So think of it as like a report card or a scorecard that's like, if the output it does these things and it checks all these boxes consistently, it is verifiably correct. That's what like an evaluation framework means.
Mm-hmm.
And then the ability to ask good discovery questions, map real workflows, find bottlenecks, feed information about the product back to the product team, and then also have this really deep sort of domain expertise. So if they were working in like finance, they would have an understanding of finance. If they're working in healthcare, they would have an understanding of healthcare. So this was like, if you think of this really, it's not for the faint of heart. Like this role is meaty, right? Like you got to be able to code, you've got to be able to talk to the customer, you have to be able to create evaluation frameworks, do LLM app development and have deep domain expertise. So that's why this role typically fetches a higher comp than a lot of roles on the market right now.
That's a very good summary, because it's almost like you have to have a project management understanding on how you then scope this out with the customer. You then have to have that communication level skills of how do I put this in a succinct summaries for others. But then you also need to have the technical skills, right? Which is probably we could take some technical persons there, but then how do you train them on the customer success side that has that level of skills? I'd be interested to know also a little bit, when you did a side-by-side comparison with the traditional CSM role, what's the difference? Is it more on the technical side, or are there other things that are different as well?
Yeah, so in my research, I also wanted to know, like, how does this compare to the traditional CSM role, right? So if you look at this chart, on the left-hand side, you see sort of the traditional CSM as we all know it, driving adoption, renewals, expansions, right, across a portfolio of accounts, acting as like a facilitator, coordinating engineering support, the customer, running QBRs, success plans, and then you can see the compensation there at the bottom. So that's sort of the CSM role as we know it. And then if we compare that to a forward deployed engineer, there's a few things. So one is on a design level. So they figure out the actual technical solution to the customer's problem and how it fits in their system. And then their ability to write real production software, so to code, deliver working code, and then deploy that. So shipping that software live inside the customer's environment, and then keeping it running, iterating and improving over time. And then building that evaluation framework that I mentioned, which is like a report card for the AI to prove that it works in the customer's real data. And then they also run things like hackathons, so spending days on site, building alongside the customer's team. So they're like, think of them as like embedded inside the customer's organization. They would work with far fewer customers than a CSM, much more coding, engineering background, deploying, feeding information again back to product. So these are like, they're actually like very different roles.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think this fits in with the question we have from one of our audience. So where Andrea Carlson asked, where does the partnering with the client to define goals and outcomes come in, more than a delivery, more than discovering their requirements? So I guess here's where you're giving the answer, that it really links back to the understanding how you make these couple of customers that you own wildly successful, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that's why like AI native companies basically realized that like if they were going to ship in sort of software, that the customer wasn't going to get anything meaningful from that software unless they actually helped them do that. Like unless they made sense of the customer's data, mapped out some workflows, actually like put the AI to work. And so like very different role again than the CSM.
Yeah, you're taking it from really explaining what the system does to embedding the system within that company. So I'm assuming, again, we also need to be talking about enterprise level deals here, because if you look at the comp and you look at the fact that they only own one or two customers, we're very, very deep embedded into a single larger organization, right?
Yes, yes. And very often, a forward deployed engineer is assigned to enterprise level accounts, particularly for companies like OpenAI and Anthropic. But smaller AI native companies, they'll leverage forward deployed engineers even for smaller accounts when they're first getting going. They won't be as deeply sort of ingrained in the customer. But just imagine like these companies don't have a lot of customers yet. They want to make sure that their software is wildly successful. They want to feed how the customer is using it back into their product team. And so in that case, they'll have forward deployed engineers assigned even to non-enterprise level accounts.
Right. Actually, that brings us to a point, because I guess there is a definition of forward deployed engineer, but I think you've also discovered there are more than one type. And then this is what your research showed in terms of the job adverts. So do you want to tell us a little bit more about the three core types that you identified?
Sure. Yeah. So there is more than one type of forward deployed engineer, and this is where things can actually get a little bit confusing because what I found at least is that there's a lot of talk about forward deployed engineers in the market right now, but it's really important to understand which forward deployed engineer we're actually talking about. And so I'm actually going to do this in reverse order here, but look on the very far right side, the Palantir model. Again, this is where forward deployed engineers or forward deployed software engineers, called deltas in their case, were deploying an existing platform. So they're deploying Palantir's Foundry or Gotham platform into a specific industry, and it was often delivered through a consultancy like Accenture or Deloitte. So think of like more specialized consulting engagements, heavy travel, latest product influence. So that's one model. And then another model is like the one that Anthropic and OpenAI and XAI, Google DeepMind are running. So look on the left side now. Forward deployed engineer works for the company that makes the AI model. So they work for, say, Anthropic and not a consultancy. And they build applications on the newest models and feed that learning back to the product roadmap. So it's the most prestigious role. It's the highest paid. There's lighter travel. So like think the AI maker sending its own engineers to make the customer succeed. Okay. And then the middle, this is where things get really interesting. So this is like your startup founding FDE in companies like Lovable and Ramp and Cresta, Harvey, Glean, etc. Right? So early stage startup, this is the person that basically owns the entire post-sales function. So once they land the first handful of customers, they are feeding what they're learning about the product right back into the product team. They're the most entrepreneurial. They're deeply involved in sales. So they're wearing more hats, if you will. Like they're inside the customer's organization, making sure that they're successful, feeding information back to the product so the product keeps improving, but also they're involved a little bit in sales. They're still running a lot of discovery. They're communicating with executives. So this is the role that actually disrupts traditional CS more than anything, because now we're talking about replacing the post-sales chain with an FDE role.
Right. And interesting, you got some of those companies there. We did a search together for the benefit of the audience a couple of days ago, and we had look at other companies that are not necessarily the traditional startups as well, but they're companies like Atlassian, who is obviously a Jira company. You might know it as such, but they are not necessarily fall into the startup category, and they don't necessarily fall into the AI category, native AI company. And then there are some other ones I think you also discovered, like Salesforce, who's hiring right now. Who else did you find?
Yeah, so you're right, and that there are others that fall outside of these three boxes, right? So I did look at who is hiring right now. And so this is just a representative, but again, I was out and asked Claude Code to analyze like all of these job postings, tell me who's hiring. And you can see like you have your frontier lab companies like Anthropic and OpenAI and XAI. You have your Palantir, they're still hiring this role. Then you have your startup sort of AI native companies like Lovable and Harvey and Ramp. And then you have like companies like Salesforce and Monday.com who are hiring this role that are more traditional SaaS companies. So we are seeing a variety of companies sort of hiring for this role. In fact, Salesforce, I think, committed to hiring 1,000 FDEs. So I predict that it's only a matter of time before more traditional SaaS companies will hire this role. So think ServiceNow, for instance, and then sort of down the chain from there in terms of SaaS companies. But and I'm going to answer a question I know you're probably thinking, which is like, well, if we are one of these companies, like a more traditional SaaS company, so we're not a frontier lab, right? We're not OpenAI, and we're not an AI native startup, and we're not Palantir, but we kind of fall in like the SaaS bucket. At what point do we need a forward deployed engineer? And the answer to that is when your product demands one.
Nice. And what category would you say your product needs to be in order to demand it?
Well, basically the model is like, okay, if you ship software, if a company buys a piece of software, but it's like a shell, like it's all powerful, but it doesn't actually do anything until you feed data and you connect workflows and you create, right, an output. That's when you need it, right? When like you basically need a forward deployed engineer to go in to look at the customer's data, help them connect everything, help them map the workflows, help them create the output, verify that that's correct, right? Feed that back into the model, feed information back to the product team, and sort of rinse and repeat with the ability to like code and deploy live in the customer system sort of all at once. So if your software right now, like if you're in a SaaS company and your software doesn't demand that, you don't need a forward deployed engineer.
I think that answers Almer's question. Let me take Andrea's question as well, which is quite relevant to this, is how is the ROI measured for these roles? And I think that's really a variable question still. And I think that what you were just explaining there about the product in terms of, well, what is the output you want out of the product and how do you measure it being wildly successful in the company, right?
Yeah, and I would say that goes back to how we've always measured success, which is, are you helping your customer make money, save money, or gain efficiency, or mitigate risk, right? Like, and so if you can do that, if the output of your solution is doing that, if the forward deployed engineer is facilitating that, then it is successful.
Right. We've got another question, which is from management of the FDA. Who did it report to? And I think maybe that's an interesting question to debate. And I think you have something around slide around what does the role mean for the future of post sales? Because I think this is also relevant in terms of who actually takes care of this person? Because like we discussed, the skill set is partly technical, partly commercial, right?
Yes. So let me answer that question first, and then I'll talk about, well, what does this all mean for the future of post sales? So one, it's really telling who the role reports into. If the role reports into engineering, it is more of an engineering coding type role, more of the sort of traditional role, if you will. So reporting into engineering, but it can also report just into customer success. And in that case, it's very likely an AI native startup where the FDE role is basically replacing the post sales function, if you will. So if you're looking at a job posting, always look at who it reports into. That sort of tells you the depth, breadth of experience, particularly coding, that they're going to need. So that's one thing. And I elaborate more on that in the guide. So make sure to go and grab that. And then I'll answer your next question, which is like, well, okay.
What does it all mean?
Yeah, what does this all mean? Like, Andrea, tell us what this means. So
what do I need to know now?
So here's what it means. So it means that initially, and I'm talking about more AI native startups in this case, it means that the post sales chain is collapsed, meaning that like FDE roles are basically absorbing 4 roles into one: a solutions engineer, an implementation specialist, a TAM, and a senior CSM. And so that's why with AI native companies, you're not seeing them hire a lot of CSMs. You're seeing them hire more technical roles. Okay. So that's what's happening. But then what you see as these companies mature is that they actually do bring in a CSM. So they start with like an FDE, but then in order to scale, to service more customers, larger customers, they need CSMs to own the relationship, the expansion. So the FDE is like owning the build and the product feedback, and the CSM is owning the relationship, the renewal. Okay. So as they grow, they are hiring CSMs. And then the third thing here is, this is actually my prediction, which is I think the role is actually going to disappear again. And what I mean by that is like right now, sort of leveraging AI native software, there's a big learning curve to it. There's a lot of like testing and hooking up the data, and like there's a lot to it. But I actually predict that like as technology evolves, as AI evolves, we won't need to do as much verifying. It will be more correct. We won't need to, go through all this data cleanup. Like somehow it'll be able to take our data and like automatically, clean it up for us. And so I think, this role is very much needed right now, but whether it continues to exist, I don't think we'll be hiring as many FDEs a few years from now.
So you would still predict that we carry on with obviously having some sort of customer success roles here. And it goes back to your argument that someone has to prove the value regardless of whether it's within the organization or your more traditional CSM side of role.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, we're always going to have post sales. And I do predict that like, while CSMs the AI native companies aren't hiring a lot of them right now, that's going to ramp up. And then I think it will continue into the future. FDE role is super hot right now. But like, I don't think it's going to continue the boom that we're seeing. So if you're CSM and you are looking for your next role, an FDE role might be a great role for you. If you're, really like looking to code, get deeper in an organization, you're comfortable with data, like you could upskill to that role. And also, if you're looking, there's hope. I do think that like more CSM roles will be hired in the future because an FDE cannot do it all. And I don't think that they'll be as needed as they are right now.
Good quote. Good summary there. Let me take a question from David. What are the official credentials platforms in order to qualify as an FDE? Is there such thing as a accreditation? Or where must one go to learn or acquire the skills? And I think that's probably a little bit of a varied answer depending on what level you're looking to upskill yourself as?
Yeah, so I would say definitely check out the guide. So I go into more detail about that, like what are the skills that you would need. I think I even outline some of the courses that you might need to take. And again, it does depend. Like if you were looking at like an AI native startup, if you could, you can vibe code or you learn how to code. You can run hackathons. You're comfortable in data. You're comfortable verifying outcomes. Like you could easily upskill into that role. You're not going to go out and apply for like Palantir's sort of FDE. And I doubt that you're going to apply for like OpenAI and Anthropic's either. It's probably that AI native startup or even that SaaS company like a Monday.com. But even a Salesforce, if you're highly fluent in Salesforce, like that might be a possibility as well.
Yeah, back to from your domain expertise, this is something that you can then easily converse into the customer organization and bring that value of understanding how they can use the product to their best ability. So that's interesting piece. What you talk there for CSMs, what they should think about if they want to hire, if they want to carry on and doing a career. What about CS leaders? How do you think they should be thinking about this role in their organization if they do need to hire someone?
Yes. So I tell all CS leaders that I talk to that like it's only a matter of time before your board is going to ask you, do we need forward deployed engineers? And so right now, you just need to be able to answer that question, yes or no. And so you need to know what the role is and whether your product warrants an FDE role or whether your product might warrant it in the future. Depending on your product's roadmap and how aggressively you're implementing AI, would your product need it in the future? So right now, it's really just about awareness, know what the role is, where did it come from, whether you need it, the different types of the role. You just want to be able to speak really intelligently at the executive level about why you do or could or would need this role sort of in the future. Most companies right now, I would say, do not need this role. They're just not here yet. Their SaaS companies have a lot of work to do to sort of catch up to AI native companies. And depending on how aggressive your roadmap is, that'll dictate how quickly you might need a role like this.
Super. There's quite a few comments around, obviously the FDA's work in a company where you have enterprise clients with huge contracts. We've also, I guess, mentioned again a couple of times that they may also work in startups where you're looking to learn about how your product fits into customer organizations, right?
Yeah. Yep. Exactly. Yep.
Yeah. Perfect. We are getting to about time. If anyone has more questions, please do share with us. Obviously, feel free to connect with Andrea or myself on LinkedIn. We're there. Andrea has also done the guide, so could you grab that? That is in comments there. But I think it's just a conversation that is just starting at this point in time. We'll be carefully watching on what's going to happen with it and how more it's going to reduce, explode, or reduce over the course of the coming period, right?
Yes. Yeah. You definitely want to be watching this role for sure.
Thank you. Anything else, Andrea, you would like to share with the audience? I know you just put the QR code there again for the guide.
Yeah, so I put up the QR code for the guide. Feel free to go and grab it. You can download all the research that I did. I showed some of it here, but there's more in the guide. So definitely grab that as a reference. If you have any questions, like reach out to me on LinkedIn. I feel like I've done enough research on this role to be dangerous. Like I know what it is, where it came from, the future of the role, but it's also evolving all the time. So as Mina said, like you want to be watching this role, just having a finger on the pulse, knowing what it means. And again, if you're a CS leader, you need to be able to answer the question right now, like, do you need this role?
Yeah, and we can ascertain the answer for you if you like. So yeah, feel free to connect with us. Let's keep the conversation going. Andrea, as always, thank you for your thoroughly brilliant talk and presentation, and obviously thank you from everyone doing the research on behalf of everyone. I'm sure lots of people will appreciate that. That's it from us today. Thanks again for joining. And if you were watching live, obviously, thank you so much for being there. And if you're watching as a post recording, again, hook us up if you have more questions and you weren't able to ask those today. We will be back soon. Take care. Have a good evening, good afternoon, or the rest of your day. Bye for now.
Thanks all.